I've officially busted out my textbooks. We are going on an unhinged, chaotic voyage of Saturn and Neptune in Aries. This is a really important transit that's going to be going on for the next couple of years, beginning with Saturn's entrance into Aries here in May of 2025. So what I want to do today is make sure we've got a feel for the spiritual invitation that's coming through with this energy, because it is a tall order, but the rewards we can gain from stepping up to the plate are really incredible. I actually have Saturn and Neptune conjunct in Capricorn in my birth chart. So it's a combination that really fascinates me because I live it, but also because Saturn and Neptune are so different. Saturn's the Lord of darkness, of time, of death, of decay, of old things, of deceit and feigned appearances, of fear itself. And Neptune is illusions, delusions, transcendence and unity, as well as being completely out of touch with reality, getting lost in the mist, in the fog. And when we have a conjunction, we need to synthesize these energies. We need to figure out how they merge. In my lived experience, that's been a lot about releasing the grip of Saturn in order to access the healing and the connection of Neptune. It can also be the need to have some restraint that has some kind of spiritual payoff. And it can be even about learning how to be honest and how you can really only connect with people when you're willing to let them in. But I happen to have this placement in Capricorn, so the feel is quite different than Saturn conjunct Neptune in Aries. We're talking about the difference between a Saturn in its own domicile, Capricorn, versus Saturn in its fall, Aries. For me, what Saturn in Aries is all about is courage. Putting us in situations that require us to be courageous, to tap into our heart and our feelings and what we really care about, what we're deeply passionate about, and frankly, what we came here to do, having the courage to do it. From a really zoomed out perspective, this is how I'm thinking about it. Saturn situations are necessarily uncomfortable because they push us to be responsible for ourselves. In the most spiritual sense, that means there's something that you are required, quote unquote, to do in this lifetime. You have a sacred agenda, and it's your responsibility to uphold it. So being responsible for yourself means doing the actions that are required of you to execute this spiritual agenda that you have. There's a couple problems with that. Number one, it's scary to follow that agenda. It requires you to be uncomfortable a lot of the time, to say no to things, to give things up that don't fit that purpose anymore. And that is very, 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 very hard to do. And a lot of people live their whole lives unwilling to do it. I really think that is the regret people feel at the end of their lives. It's rooted a lot in, what I didn't do, but really the sting of being too scared to do it because they knew what they needed to do, but they didn't do it. I also think that it's hard to even know what that sacred agenda is a lot of the time. We don't really know why we're here. We have some idea of the experiences that we're drawn to and the things that we're inclined to. And of course, the more we have a spiritual practice, the more in touch we are with that sacred agenda. But a lot of us are really looking for clues all the time. That's why we listen to astrology content, right? We want to know what time it is. We want a way to orient ourselves in the spiritual realm of our lives. And it can be really hard to not just know what we're doing, but even more like why? What is the purpose here? What is the goal? That's why you see so many people asking questions about what their purpose is. The question of my purpose is going to be a part of the Saturn and Aries story. One of the significations of Saturn that I never really see people talking about is that of being dishonest. And I think a lot about honesty and the spiritual path, that knowing and executing your sacred agenda requires constant honesty, brutal honesty. If we're all being honest with ourselves, I think every day we're doing things that take us away from living in our purpose, if we want to use that phrasing. I will add an aside here that I think your purpose is not a singular thing. It's a way of being that you can access through many different actions. It's not like my purpose is to be a mom to biological children. It's my purpose is to mother others. Or my purpose is to be a trapeze artist, but my purpose is to perform and bring joy to people. But the point is that Saturn shows us where we're not being honest. And I think that's because Saturn situations feel scary. So when we're in a scary situation, we're trying to survive, right? And oftentimes we will say or do whatever we need to say or do to avoid the fear we're trying to avoid. And that can lead us to lie. Now, I don't know about you, but pretty much anytime I lie, it's because I'm trying to avoid something. I'm afraid of an outcome and I'm trying to manipulate the situation. That's just being real. I think that Saturn situations bring that out in us because, again, we're usually trying to avoid the hardship, the challenge, the responsibility that whatever that Saturn moment is bringing us. Now, if you think about Saturn in Aries, this is a Saturn that is in its fall. Saturn is exalted in Libra, sign of the scales, and that means it's lifted up. So when a planet is in fall, like Saturn in Aries, it's like lower than the ground. It's fallen and it's got to get back up. So it's more challenging for the planet to be the way it wants to be. We can take this to mean that it's going to be hard to be real about the situation that we're in, that we're going to be asked to maybe give up or let go of, because that is a very Saturn thing as well, something very familiar. And I say that because Aries is a sign of the frontier. It's all new in Aries. So we're going to have to do something much different, I think. We're going to have to really pivot. And in the area of life that Aries indicates in your chart, for example, if you're a Libra rising, Aries is your 7th house. This is going to be about your partnerships, your people, the one-on-ones in your life. Something is done, right? And it's time for us to get real about what's not working. It's going to take a lot of work to get it to where we want it to be. And that's where courage comes in. Saturn in Aries is asking us to courageously embrace the new beginnings that we desperately need. Now, the other piece of this, of course, is Neptune. Saturn and Neptune are not going to conjoin exactly until 2026. They're going to get pretty close this summer. However, they are close enough that it matters, and we can essentially say they are conjoined, though it's not exact. When two planets are conjoined, their significations merge, their energies merge. Neptune is a dissolver. It is illusions, delusions, transcendence. It can be an experience of great unity and being at one with the collective. And it can also be drinking the Kool-Aid at Jonestown. Assuming we're going to get Pluto at its best, in the best case scenario, this combination can say something like the beauty and transcendence that's possible when you surrender and have trust and connect with the God consciousness that Neptune has the capacity to connect with. You have to remember that you're not in this alone. You have to surrender your will to something greater. I know that sounds, I don't know how that sounds actually. You may not like the sound of that, but I think that's one of the highest expressions of Neptune, is that it can allow us to touch that, because really so much of what we're here to do on Earth is have an individual experience. And so it's a good thing to not always be tapped into that. But it can be so healing to allow yourself every now and then to really trust fall even back into that feeling of connected consciousness with the collective. When we take Saturn and Neptune together, we could say that maybe that's what's available to us if we have the courage to let go of the structures and the ways of being and the rules that are no longer working, that we can come back together to some greater truth and be united by that. On the other hand, when we are in tough times and we are working really fucking hard, which is what Saturn and Aries is giving to me, it can be very tempting to look for an easy solution, to wish for a savior. And that is where we can get into a lot of trouble with Neptune and Aries. Some new person, some new iconoclast, some new philosopher, some new man with a plan comes through and says, I've got this great idea. And maybe it's a spiritual guru, right? That's like very Neptune. It's giving the Great Awakening, where you've got just droves of people going to these spiritual revivals and being saved. And it may not look like a religious institutional thing. It could be a political party. It's really just about someone galvanizing people. And that could be a really helpful thing, but that kind of power in the wrong person's hands, obviously not a great thing. So it's a time where we really need to learn how to be discerning, and discerning will be more challenging because guess who's in charge of discernment? Saturn. And guess who's going to be having a tough time in Aries? Saturn. Now, I don't want to sound like doom and gloom or scare you guys because I know that this is like a lot. I'm not exactly talking about a stroll through the park or something, but what I am saying is there is great potential here to find out what you're capable of. That is the invitation. It's not about worrying about how hard it's going to be. It's about recognizing that there's real work to do and that there will be a necessary shedding and letting go, but then trusting that the universe is going to be helping you as you allow this to occur. And I'm not just saying that because of the good potential of Neptune, but also the reality of Jupiter in Cancer. Saturn and Jupiter will be squaring each other. What that's telling me is the necessary ending in the Aries part of our charts is also the like compost pile for the blessings of Jupiter in Cancer. Like Jupiter is saying there's help here. Leap and you will find solid ground. And I think we should all really put a lot of faith and trust into Jupiter in Cancer right now, because it is that helpful and it is that beautiful of a signature that it says to me, as hard as Saturn and Aries could be, that is at least as much of how incredible Jupiter in Cancer could be, how helpful, how healing, and how restorative. So I do think it's about courage. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about the courage to live the life you want to live and to follow your spiritual path, to have the honesty with yourself to know what that is and what you're doing that's helping and hindering your progress on that path, and then having the determination and the grit and the trust in the universe to take the steps to live that path. It's pretty fucking cool, honestly. If not challenging, if not a little scary, but a very powerful moment where we can give ourselves the reset that we really need on a spiritual level. If this is sounding interesting and intriguing to you and you are looking for support through this journey, I just created a mini course called The Disruptor. It's actually more of a hands-on framework for working with your inner critic, which, surprise, surprise, that is Saturn. Your inner critic is fueled by fear, and knowing that Saturn in Aries is going to bring us into situations that might arouse that fear, I thought it would be smart to create a set of tools and a repeatable structure that you can use to work with situations that activate you so that you can regulate your nervous system, you can reprogram harmful limiting beliefs that are not helping you anymore, and ultimately integrate back into yourself the way you want to move through the world with more intention and more purpose. You can find out more about that down below. In the meantime, I wish you nothing but the best this Saturn in Aries. I wish you a lot of courage, and I wish you a lot of fuck it, I'm doing this energy. That is the beautiful thing about Aries, is it's headstrong. It refuses to see an obstacle, and that's what I want for us while we're traversing this terrain of Saturn and Aries. All of the trust in the universe, all of the belief in yourself, and knowing that the work you put in is worth it. Until next time, have a wonderful, beautiful, marvelous day. Happy Gemini season. I'll talk to you guys soon.